was necessary for that to be done.
So, Trevor MacDonald, it is our privilege to have you with us this morning.
Thank you
very much indeed. As we've been hearing this morning, today is another day for poignant memories and tributes to Her Majesty the Queen.
But also it is another momentous day ahead as the new Prince of Wales, the new Prime Minister, the Archbishop of Canterbury and other members of the Privy Council gather together at St James's Palace in London to hear the new monarch proclaimed king in an historic ceremony which will, for the very first time, be televised.
Coming up next, an ITV News special programme, The Proclamation of the King, presented by Tom Bradby.
Good morning and welcome to our coverage of a historic first. The Accession Council has its origins well before the Norman conquest of 1066. It takes some explaining, which we will endeavour to do, but it is to be televised for the first time this morning, which should be fascinating. Charles III became king at the moment of his mother's passing, which also perhaps does bear some explaining in terms of its common law origins. But he has known from birth that his reign would begin both in sorrow and in public. This morning's ceremony is all about the historic need for leaders to be seen from the start. Continuity keeps the crown alive. Well, today, King Charles III will be formally recognised and proclaimed at a gathering of the most senior figures in British life, present and past. After the briefest of periods out of the public gaze in the immediate aftermath of the news of the Queen's death at Balmoral, the new monarch was back in the spotlight. And on his return to London, the King has already begun to set the tone for his own reign, stopping his car before it entered the gates of Buckingham Palace to speak to those who had come with condolences for the loss of his mother ahead of last night's moving address.
As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. And wherever you may live in the United Kingdom, or in the realms and territories across the world, and whatever may be your background or beliefs, I shall endeavour to serve you with loyalty, respect, and love, as I have throughout my life.
In the next hour, St James's Palace, just a 5 minutes walk from Buckingham Palace, of course, will hold an accession council to do just that. Throughout the ages, it has been the setting for some of the most important events in royal history, and it remains the home of the royal court. For the very first time, our cameras have been allowed in to witness the event, which will be attended by several hundred politicians, senior members of the clergy, and other high-ranking public servants. All are members of the Privy Council, a group appointed by the monarch to advise and sign off on new law. And in the grand tradition of announcing a new monarch, at 11 o'clock, the balcony outside St James's Palace will then be filled for a royal proclamation, the first since the Queen's reign began in 1952. Well, to guide us through the events of the next 3.5 hours, I'm joined by royal historians Bob Morris and Anna Whitelock and royal author Penny Jr. We'll get their thoughts very shortly. But first, Paul Brand is at St James's Palace, where the Accession Council and first proclamation of the new king will take place. Paul, talk us through the significance of what we're about to witness.
Morning, Tom. Well, before the days of rolling news and mobile phones, this was quite literally the original news flash, the way that news would have travelled by word of mouth that we had a new monarch. It's